Our history isn't in the past. Our heritage isn't our better times. Our culture isn't done being defined. It's in the air. It's in the earth. It's in the waters. As it has been for thousands of years, as it still is this morning. Sri Lanka isn't a place, it's a marvel, a brave new world that wasn't made by the rules. She's a rebel of nature. She's a blessing of imagination, of untold innovation and resilience. Let's tell the story of Sri Lanka with the same courage this island was born of. It's in how we love, how we believe, how we protect, how we share, how we feast, and how we heal. As we dismiss strangers by making them friends. Because that stuff of stars that is beneath our feet, the brilliance that makes the monsoon waltz around lush hills and save itself to soothe scorched plains. The wonder that makes the salty seas nurture jungles of pure paradise. And the wild beauty that stays fierce and vibrant even as time tries to quieten it is in us. And now it's time to show the world Sri Lanka as it has always been, but never been realized before.
On all four directions are works in stone and roundels of gold, broad the quadrangles and mansions of mighty mould, tall the gabled houses and balconies. Where else? Not on earth, but in heavens are those of such elegance and girth. A nation steeped in history. A nation with incredible cultural diversity. A nation of heavenly heights and purity. A nation of legendary beaches. A nation whose capital, Colombo, resonates with tradition and modernity. Occupying a pride of place in this unique nation and the city is the Open University of Sri Lanka, OUSL, Sri Lanka's premier ODL institution. And we are ready to welcome for AAOU is opening minds for a sustainable future, reorienting ODL to surmount challenges. With this theme, we intend to create intellectual spaces and opportunities for reflecting on the UNESCO concern of education as a means of sustainable development.
As a founding member of the AAOU, the Open University of Sri Lanka celebrates its 40th anniversary in 2020. We offer AAOU our inimitable and peerless experiences to open minds and cultivate the notions of sustainable education.
OUSL and AAOU. Let us expand the horizons of ODL.
Ayubowan, Vanakkam. I warmly welcome you to the inaugural session of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities, hosted by the Open University of Sri Lanka, OUSL, the nation's premier ODL institution from the Colombo campus, Sri Lanka.
Welcome to Sri Lanka, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, the land that combines the pleasure of culture, sunshine, and the turquoise blue sea all around it. We sincerely hope that you will enjoy the genuine and warm smiles and also the simplicity of the locals while you are connected with us today virtually.
We will formally begin this ceremony by paying respect to Sri Lanka's national anthem, Sri Lanka Mata. Thank you very much. Please be seated. We will now offer a symbolic, metaphorical event for this conference by lighting the traditional oil lamp. This oil lamp symbolically represents knowledge and wisdom. So let us light knowledge and wisdom, and to engage in this sacred act, I invite Professor S. Aryadure, Vice Chancellor OUSL and Co-Chairperson of AAOU 2021, Vidya Jyoti Emeritus Professor Engineer, Dr. Dayantes Wijesekara, Chancellor, University of Vocational Technology, Dr. Madhura Peruma, Deputy Vice Chancellor OUSL, Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe, University of Columbus School of Computing and keynote speaker for AAOU 2021, Professor Dolage, Dean, Faculty of Engineering Technology, Professor Rajendra, Dean, Faculty of Natural Sciences and Co-Chairperson, AAOU 2021, Dr. Moraes, Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor S. Kugamurthy, Dean, Faculty of Education, Professor G. Ranavaka, Dean, Faculty of Health Sciences, Professor Sivalokadasan, Dean, Faculty of Management Studies, Dr. Shanta Abesinghe, Director RES, Professor Gayatri Jayatilaka, Director SETME, Mrs. W.L. Vinda Jayasena, Registrar OUSL, Mr. A.H.K. Balasuri, Acting Librarian, Dr. Anura Vikramasinghe, Bursa OUSL, Professor Shironika Karunanayaka, AAOU 2021 Committee Member and the Chairperson of the Scientific Committee, Professor Bandarage, AAOU 2021 Committee Member, Professor Kamina Gunaratna, AAOU 2021 Committee Member, Dr. Prasad Senadir, AAOU 2000 Committee Member and Director IRU, and one member from the participants, Mr. Ranjit Priyanka. Please light this traditional oil lamp and let us ignite the flames of knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you, distinguished guests, for lighting the lamp of wisdom and knowledge. And now, Sri Lanka is well known among her visitors as a land of great hospitality. Although we are meeting virtually, we try our best to instill the same splendor in the hearts of our friends today. Let us warmly welcome you in a glamorous way. This welcome dance is presented to you by the courtesy of the Sri Lanka Army Band and their performing art troupe. Sri Lanka Army Band, and the Performing Art Troupe. Thank you so much for that lovely dance. I now cordially invite Professor Oja Daroja, the President of the Asian Association of Open Universities and the Rector of Universitas Terbuka, Indonesia, to address the gathering and also to make the declaration of opening of AAOU 2021.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Welcome to the 34th Annual Conference of the ASEAN Association of Open Universities, AAOU, which is held for 3 days beginning from today, 1st June to 3rd June 2021. On this beautiful Tuesday morning, I'm excited to finally witness this long-awaited big day of ours. I would like to express my deepest gratitude and warm welcome to the keynote speakers, panelists, and also the moderators who have been willing to get involved in these valuable events, working hard during the last few weeks to prepare the materials and enable the conference to be held successfully. Ladies and gentlemen, the AAOU is committed to promote and support the development of distance learning, particularly in Asia. One of the initiatives is through the annual conference for sharing experiences and knowledge, as well as best practices among the AAOU members in order to make distance education improve and find the most ideal distance education practices. The theme for this year's conference is Opening Minds for Sustainable Future, reorienting UDL to surmount challenges. We do hope that this theme would give us great motivation to work in harmony and improving our society, economy, and environment that positively impact one another. As we are now living in the disruption era, any choices we make today, big or small, will inevitably impact the future. Therefore, the choices we make today must ensure that social institutions, the economy, and the environment will be well supported for future generations. We do hope that conference will allow all participants to capitalize enough knowledge and experiences, especially in their contribution to reach the goal of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG, focusing on inclusive and equitable quality educations and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all parties that have supported the preparations of this special event. We all know that in the current situations, it is very challenging to host a hybrid conference, especially for us, the AAOU, as this is the very first time in our history to conduct such kind of conference. Therefore, I am very proud of the Open University of Sri Lanka to make this conference possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our deep appreciations are also delivered to the sponsors of the AAOU conference, Coursera for Campus, Mandarina Colombo, Akbar Premium Quality Tea, International Council for Open and Distance Education, ICDE, the Commonwealth of Learning, Sri Lanka Convention Bureau, Telecommunications Partner Dialogue, SLESCOM, and other sponsors. We pledge our sincerest gratitude for your generosity, both for financial and services support. The last but not least, big thank to all AAOU members for your contributions and active participations, to AAOU Secretariat members who have ensured everything is going well and organized the conference with AAOU committee members, and also to all the conference presenters and moderators. The world may currently not be okay due to this pandemic, but the delivering of education shall always be okay through these online and distant strategies. Let us all enjoy and gain valuable benefits from this event together. And by this end of my speech, I hereby declare the 34th AAOU conference is officially begun.
Thank you very much, Professor Daroja. I now warmly welcome the Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka and the co-chairperson of AAOU 2021, Professor S.A. Aryadure, to address the audience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayanti. Good morning to you all. It's with much delight that I, as the Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka and the co-chairperson of the Conference Organizing Committee, deliver this welcome address to the distinguished gathering participating in the inaugural ceremony of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities. I very specially thank the Honorable Minister of Education of the Government of Sri Lanka, Professor G.L. Piris, for accepting our invitation to be the chief guest of the inaugural ceremony. However, unfortunately, as he had to attend an important meeting at the Presidential Secretariat, he is unable to be present here in person. However, he had sent a felicitation message, which would be read in a short while. It's my privilege to extend my warm welcome to Vidya Jyoti Professor Dayantha Vijayasekara, the Chancellor of the University of Vocational Technology, for gracing this occasion as the guest of honor. Sir, your commitment to the cause of open and distance learning is well established and well known. We are honored by your presence here today to grace this occasion. I also cordially welcome the President of the AAOU and my dear friend, Professor Ojat Darojat, the Rector, University Terbuka, Indonesia, Dr. Ahmad Budiman, the Secretary General of the AAOU, the Executive Committee members of the AAOU, the keynote speakers, the panelists, the presenters, the delegates, the sponsors, distinguished invitees, and my dear colleagues from the Open University of Sri Lanka for this inaugural ceremony of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities. We would like to extend our special warm greetings from Sri Lanka to all our international participants. Ayubowan and Vanakkam to all of you. For the last 2 years, the Open University of Sri Lanka has been planning to host this conference as a grand event to mark the 40th anniversary of the university at one of the iconic five-star hotels in Colombo. Until last month, we were hoping to have at least the first day's events at the designated hotel with the local participants. However, due to the ongoing pandemic situation around the globe, and the latest lockdown in Sri Lanka, we have been forced to conduct this conference as an online event. Even though we are disappointed about this development, where we have lost an opportunity to afford the traditional Sri Lankan hospitality to our delegates in person, we are delighted that we as the Open University of Sri Lanka are pioneering yet a new initiative whereby AAOU conference
is going online for the first time in its 34-year history. The Open University of Sri Lanka is one of the 7 founder members of the AAOU, when it was inaugurated in 1987 in Bangkok, Thailand. And we are privileged and delighted to have Vidyajyothi Professor Dayantha Wijesekara, then Vice Chancellor of the OUSL, amidst us at this inauguration ceremony. The Open University of Sri Lanka is proud to be associated with the Asian Association of Open Universities, one of the leading global bodies in the field of open and distance learning. In the recent years, the OUSL has been very actively involved in various activities of the AAOU, including our staff regularly participating at the annual conferences in great numbers, availing the scholarship that is at hand for participating in international conferences. The OUSL also annually offers 2 fellowships for academic staff members from the AAOU member universities to spend about a month in Sri Lanka, conducting joint collaborative work with an OUSL academic staff member. In any nation, education is a crucial sector, making a major investment in human capital development, thus contributing to long-term productivity and growth at all levels. UNESCO considers education as a top priority, as it is the foundation on which to build peace and drive sustainable development. UNESCO's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development clearly reflects the importance of an appropriate educational response, with education explicitly formulated as a standalone goal. Numerous education-related targets and indicators are also contained within other sustainable development goals. According to UNESCO, education is both a goal and a means for attaining all other SDGs. It's not only an integral part of sustainable development, but also a key enabler for it. That is why UNESCO considers education as an essential strategy in the pursuit of the SDGs. In fact, when we decided on the theme of the conference 2 years ago, in line with the UNESCO's agenda as opening minds for sustainable future, reorienting ODL to surmount challenges, we never imagined how it would be appropriate for the current times. Today, not only traditional ODL institutes, but every educational facility around the globe, whether they are schools, universities, or even individual tuition teachers, are talking about online and distance learning. However, many a times the type of online or distance learning that is being talked about seems to be very narrow. We, the practitioners of ODL, believe that the online or distance teaching that is being currently ascribed by conventional educators is nothing more than emergency remote teaching, which I believe does not serve justice to what we know as open and distance learning or online learning. Speaking about the host of this conference, my own institute, the Open University of Sri Lanka. Globally, it is one of the oldest ODL universities. Even though we now have many other open universities, which are much larger than the OUSL, we remain as one of the very few ODL universities in the world to offer programs in wide varieties of fields, including engineering, sciences, health sciences, education, humanities, and management. Without any doubt, the Open University of Sri Lanka has immensely contributed to the higher education sector of this country during its existence over the last 40 years. The university has made significant inroads into higher education field by providing alternative pathways for education to working adults and young adults who had chosen the opportunity we have provided. Further, the OUSL has democratized the higher education sector in the country, which was limited to a privileged few due to the scarcity of university places in the conventional universities, by opening our doors to every citizen of this country who is 18 years and above, thus demolishing the barriers to access of higher education such as excessive costs, restrictive eligibility criteria, and historical elitism. The university provides largely unrestricted access to high-quality education for all through a deliberate focus shift to inclusivity and affordability. With the establishment of our regional and study centers in every district of this country, we have taken learning opportunities to all our students almost to their doorsteps. The 34th Annual Conference of the AAOU, hosted by the OUSL, is an online conference that, as much as possible, replicates the regular on-site conference. We have included the inaugural and the closing ceremonies, including the traditional cultural shows. We have taken greater pains to see that the delegates would not miss out on anything when it comes to the actual conference presentations. However, obviously, we cannot compensate the personal interaction you would have had in an on-site conference. And of course, we are sorry we are not able to serve you with some of the exquisite Sri Lankan cuisines. We are also sorry that you would not get the chance to see the splendor, one of the most naturally beautiful countries on the planet, and the hospitality of the land of the smiling people, belonging to diverse cultural, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. However, I would like to extend my invitation to all the delegates to visit Sri Lanka on a future date once the pandemic situation eases and the life returns to normal. At this point of time, I would like to take the opportunity to convey my heartfelt thanks to my staff who have very meticulously planned every aspect of this conference. More than 120 staff of the university were involved in the planning and staging of the conference, led by Professor J.C. and Rajendra, the conference chairperson. They have been working tirelessly over the last year or so to make this conference a great success. Even though numerous people from my university were involved in the organization of the conference, I would like to mention the names of 3 persons and their efficient and dynamic teams which contributed immensely for the success of this conference. My heartfelt thanks are to the chairperson of the scientific committee, Professor Shironika Karananayaka, and her able team of about 30 academic staff members who spent numerous days and nights in organizing the academic part of the conference to near perfection. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to the chairpersons of the technical committee, Dr. Utpala Premaratna and Dr. Saminda Fernando, and the energetic team of 10 technical staff members who, in a very short time, turned around the on-site conference to an effective online conference. I should also say a big thank you to the team from our event management company, Aitken Spence Events and Conference, led by Mrs. Nadika Lineagoda, who are very accommodative to all the changing scenarios of the conference due to the unpredictable pandemic situation. Our sincere gratitude to all the sponsors of the conference for their generous support in various forms. On a personal note, this would be the last AAOU conference I would be participating as the Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka, as my 2 terms as the Vice Chancellor is about to end in a few weeks' time. During my tenure, I have made every effort to ensure that my university is actively involved in the activities of the AAOU. It's my fervent hope that our relationship with the AAOU will continue to grow and we would remain an active constituent of the AAOU. On my behalf, I assure that my involvement with the AAOU on an individual capacity would continue throughout my professional career. The friendships I have developed across the borders within the AAOU family would be remembered and cherished for a very long time. Before I conclude my speech, let me once again extend a very warm welcome to all the participants of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities and wish you all an academically enriching and rewarding experience. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Aryadurre, for that very beautiful and emotional and very detailed speech. We will now move to the next very textual item in this 34th annual conference of AAOU, launching of a special magazine. The Open Quarterly is Open University of Sri Lanka's quarterly news magazine, which is dedicated to disseminating all events, all information about ODL and the Open University, and to commemorate, as a respect and as an offering for this AAOU conference, the second issue of the magazine is dedicated to the AAOU conference. I invite our Vice Chancellor, Professor Anbahan Aryadurre, to click open this magazine and allow you a surface glance at the contents of this very important publication. Yeah, the Open Quarterly, that is yours. Professor Aryadurre has just clicked open the Open Quarterly. This is produced by the Public Information Division and the Center for Educational Technology, and it contains articles that cover the global and the local aspects of the conference, as well as the principles of ODL and everything important. That is everything that is important to this event. Now, Professor Aryadurre will give you a surface glance of the magazine. That is your magazine cover. And we go to the very first article of the magazine, written by Professor Aryadurre himself, covers the global scenario of AAOU, the connection, why AAOU is important locally and globally to everyone, all over the world, not just open ODL institutions. So that is your very first article. And if we go to the second article, that covers the Sri Lankan conference, the evolution of the Sri Lankan conference, our themes, and why those themes are there. That entire evolution of the conference is captured in the second article. And then in the third article, we cover the principles of ODL, the notions of ODL, the edges of ODL, what ODL is all about. That is extensively covered in the science of ODL in the third article. And in the fourth article, the OUSL research culture, the connection between the bonding between OUSL research culture and AAOU. Vice Chancellor said OUSL always committed its staff to participate in the AAOU conferences. That is the research culture of OUSL. And the fourth article covers the technology aspect of ODL and AAOU. That covers entirely how technology evolved at OUSL. You can see some of the black and white pictures, and pictures from the 1991 AAOU, rare pictures of 1991 AAOU conference, all captured there as the story evolves into the modern day scenario of technically matured university with the power of AAOU and the power of ODL. And finally, we go to, with that technological article, we go to how how AAOU 2021 was brought from the charming and the beautiful and hospitable city of Lahore in Pakistan to Colombo. That entire journey is captured there in the final article. And of course, we are ending with a page dedicated to our sponsors. So that is the Open Quarterly magazine. This will be uploaded on the AAOU website as well as the OUSL website for you to read. It's not just a news magazine, it's also a guidebook and also archival material. Thank you very much, Professor Aryadurre. Let us now weave an interesting promotional video by our generous sponsors, without whose generous support this event would have not have been possible.
Learning is the source of human progress.
It has the power to transform our world, from illness to health, from poverty to prosperity,
from conflict to peace.
It has the power to transform our lives for ourselves, for our families, for our communities.
No matter who we are or where we are, learning empowers us to change and grow and redefine what's possible.
That's why access to the best learning is a right, not a privilege.
And that's why Coursera is here. We partner with the best institutions to bring the best learning to every corner of the world.
So that anyone, anywhere,
has the power to transform their life through learning.
This is Dialogue Television View Mini.
Wow! 60 live TV channels.
Huh? What? It's an endless movie time.
I can talk to my remote.
Yes, go, go, go! The screen just got bigger. Change the way you watch TV with Dialogue Television View Mini, powered by Android TV.
A milk coffee for me?
Money has to be sent to Anna in the morning and the electricity bill has to be paid.
What is today's schedule?
Diafa Uyana 2 p.m. film shooting at 3 p.m.
How's today's weather?
Sunny day, no rain, temperature 27 degrees.
Switch off TV, lights off. You know the account that fits my busy lifestyle? BOC 18 Plus Smart Gen, the smart choice for today's youth.
Let us now listen to the thoughts and reflections of our guest of honor, Vidya Jyoti Emeritus Professor Engineer, Dr. Dayantes Vijayasekara, Chancellor, University of Vocational Technology, Advisor, Public and Private Tertiary Education, Consultant, Civil Engineering and Tertiary Educational Development. Dear sir, while thanking you for gracing this occasion, we warmly invite you to come and address this audience.
Good morning to all of you. I'm very pleased to be here at this boardroom of the Open University this morning. And my memories go back so many years since 1985, since we have been working together in this university. It was indeed an honor to have been one of the 7 founder members of the Asian Association of the Open Universities. May I, first of all, address to the president of the AAOU, Professor Ojat Darujat, Dr. Ranmat Bariman, Secretary General of the AAOU, and the co-chairpersons of this conference, Professor Arya Dore and Professor Rajendran, the officers of this university, including the deans, registrar, Bursan, all the others who have been very cooperatively helping in this conference. We are sorry that the invited chief guest is unable to be here, Professor G.L. Pires, who was a co-vice chancellor in early 90s, was very cooperative with the establishment of this Open University and gave his support when he was the vice chancellor of the Colombo University. Having said that, in 1987, the inaugural meeting was held at the Sukhothai Tamilta Open University in Bangkok, STOU. And immediately after that, the founding agreement was signed. And thereafter, the first conference at the University of India in Tokyo was held. Having been the Secretary General of the AAOU, which hosted in Sri Lanka in 1991, the annual conference, it gives me now great satisfaction to note the Open University of Sri Lanka, OUSL, hosting the conference this year in Colombo after 30 years. Thus bringing nostalgic memories. These feelings are enhanced having been at the inauguration of this conference today, having completed my long tenure of 9 years in 1994 as the Vice Chancellor of the Sri Lanka Open University, and I'm the Secretary General of the AAOU and the President-elect at that time. My first challenge as a Vice Chancellor of the Open University was to reason why it was called open. I'm sure we are still being asked that question. Well, most of them who made this inquiry had their own interpretation at that time, because all the other 7 universities in the country were conventional universities and they were all closed. And that's why we were called open. That's what they said. But in my own mind, I had it that it was because we were always open for criticism, in addition to other reasons. The next challenge was when I came to hear that I was appointed by the authorities as the Vice Chancellor of this university with the intention to close the university, as its performance was not acceptable before my assumption of duties based on an external report. However, with my colleagues, we took up this challenge, and the progress made by the university was much to the envy of some of the conventional universities. I would like to give a small incident which took place during my period. On the television, there was a program called University Challenge. And that was a competition between all the universities on various disciplines of study. And we in the Open University were not asked to compete because we had a big wide age range and there'd be very senior people competing, and it wasn't fair by the others. But we were asked to coordinate the activity, the University Challenge program on the television programs. When we coordinated that, to our surprise, there were several disciplines where we were only the people getting the programs going and the results released. To our surprise, one of the persons who were judged the best, or the gold medal winner, was called to the rostrum and given the medal. And when she was leaving the stage, our not so soft-spoken dean at that time, Professor Jane Fernando, shouted, "She's one of our students." To see, this Colombo University student was also a student of the Open University. She was the winner. So that shows how rapidly the image went up among the student body as well. Of course, the next challenge was to ensure the image of the Open University was that of an online, open and distance learning institute, which seemed not that easy, as the predominant science and engineering technology degree courses seem to need much face-to-face components in distance education, which was therefore the theme at the 1991 AAOU conference in Sri Lanka 30 years ago. I remember in this very room we were discussing why it is necessary to have face-to-face sessions in some fields of study. While various efforts were made by the donor-funded projects and the Commonwealth of Learning to enhance the distance education modernization concepts with infrastructure development facilities island-wide, through which it would have enabled the youth not having online and group distance to have distance learning facilities in the remote areas, an opportunity to meet together at the centers and develop themselves to the online mode. Considering the very appropriate theme, the organizers have decided for this conference, opening minds for a sustainable future, reorienting ODL to surmount challenges. I have to admit that it was a lapse on my part as well, not to have been able to impose and sustain the objectives of the ODL. This shortcoming became evident with the COVID-19, making its presence felt by disrupting education facilities to continue smoothly and making ODL almost indispensable. The current pandemic gave rise to this challenge, not only for Sri Lanka, but for the whole world, where online education facilities were not fully ready, but continued to be the only avenue available as the circumstances. It is evident that even from preschool education, primary education, right up to undergraduate and postgraduate education, higher education programs of study were almost fully dependent on online education, online mode, and most often in an unprofessional manner of imparting the knowledge through this mode, as this was mostly conducted by staff not trained for teaching in the mode. And some of the young students themselves were used to individual private tuition, what we call spoon feeding, and how can they now do online studies? Dissemination of knowledge and relevant deliberations which were usually done face-to-face collectively has now to be done online. Excuse me. Though apparently larger numbers could participate even globally, however, the effectiveness of such dialogue has yet to be seen. The staff have not been specifically trained for the purpose, which could be a major disadvantage. This would include even sessions and conferences as this one you are in progress today. This is the real distance conference. We have so many delegates who are listening to us overseas, and I'm sure they would appreciate what is going on in Sri Lanka. And if the online facilities were more effective, it would have been more effective by the readiness of such facilities situation by the appropriately trained personnel and resources. But it's been done quite well here, and I must congratulate all the officers who have been assisting the Vice Chancellor as the co-chairperson to get this thing going. Therefore, for posterity, the AAOU, the Commonwealth of Learning, and other agencies could aggressively induce the staff in open and distance learning institutions to conduct some of their regular accredited programs of study in the online mode more often, not only to overcome pandemic and similar situations, hopefully not in the future, to have face-to-face sessions even in a limited manner and to continue online as much as possible. But ODL has the only alternative to regular mode of learning. When reference is made to open and distance learning till recently, before the current COVID pandemic period in our day and generation, it was to traditional fields of study and only introducing a different mode of delivery, different from face-to-face sessions. And this conference was to promote the sustainability of the innovative teaching and such modes of regularly being modernized and not sufficiently sustained. But the current crisis has opened the need for many online facilities to the extent that it has become a household word. While some students are struggling with the sudden changes to the mode, due to the unexpected sudden pandemic. Till recently, the online mode was known only to limited higher education, airline ticketing with connected facilities, and in banking sector. But now there's hardly anything not being done online. Everything is online now. I'm sure at this conference, it would not only be for open and distance learning to be considered, but also distance administration, management, catering, shopping, and almost all such services. This reminds me of the time how the Open University was embarking on a nursing degree program. I see the dean around here. A nursing degree program in the late 1980s, when I and the former dean of the Faculty of Natural Sciences, Emeritus Professor Nalin Ratnasiri, had to face awkward questions. How can you teach for a nursing degree in an open university without hospital clinical training, etc.? Not realizing the fact that the entrance to the degree program to the university had already completed the clinicals in their diploma programs and in the nursing schools. While this was so, it makes me more irritable when I hear very often in the Sri Lanka newspapers reports of the first nursing degree program in Sri Lanka being commenced in a conventional university, while they inaugurate same in the country. But the value of a nursing degree with a heavy management component of the hospital wards has become very evident among all medical and paramedical personnel with the new turn of events in the country, which has to be continuously modernized and developed, and above all, maintained and sustained for the future. Therefore, considering the very appropriate theme for the organizers for this conference, it thus gives a great responsibility on the ODL universities and higher education institutes to specialize not only conducting some of the regular education programs, but also embarking into new practical managerial fields, sharing same with other ODL institutions. This could facilitate even a particular ODL institute to specialize in an aspect and to share staff development of the specialized opportunities with either online or face-to-face with other ODL institutes. These should include continuous development of the ODL mode into new applications, making the mode user-friendly for the teachers and more to the learners, effort for cost effectiveness to the less privileged learners, and finally, develop and share compensatory measures to fill the gap by not having face-to-face group sessions. Such development aspects should be provided by the ODL Institute, and such training programs should be made obligatory to all academics in all institutions on recruitment and during their career development. In closing, may I remind those who are familiar with the Holy Bible, the prophecies recorded in the Old Testament, in the book of Amos, written nearly 3,000 years ago, of pandemics and the happenings such as those which we are experiencing presently, even to the extent of the 14-day quarantine is mentioned. Prohibition of gatherings, even at funerals, which have been held with much difficulty without the family members. So these things have been happening so many years ago, thousands of years ago as well, and they are repeating, but therefore we have to be ready for different modes of delivery and dissemination and sharing of knowledge and facilities. Finally, I wish to thank the organizers for having invited me to be here as a guest of honor. I wish the 34th annual conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities and the subsequent deliberations every success, and also especially wish the visiting delegates who are greatly missed here, but I'm sure they will be enjoying whatever is going on here, a pleasant and safe stay in our country, even the few who may be around, I don't know, despite all restrictions and health guidelines due to the prevailing pandemic situation in the country. Thank you very much.
Our honorable chief guest, Honorable Professor G.L. Piris, Minister of Education, is unable to be here, but he has sent a special message for the conference, and I invite Dr. Prasad Senadira to read out that message. Felicitation message of Professor Lakshman Gamini Piris, Honorable Minister of Education, Sri Lanka. Following is the full text of the message. Professor S. Anbahan Aryadore, the Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka, the hosting organization of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities, Professor Joseph Rajendra, Dean, Faculty of Natural Sciences and Conference Co-Chair, Professor Oja Daroja, the President of the Asian Association of Open Universities, Dr. Ahmed Budiman, Secretary General, and the members of the Executive Committee of the Asian Association of Open Universities, Professor Dayantha Wijayasekara, the Vice Chancellor of the UNIVATEC, and the guest of honor. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure I, as the Minister of Education of the Government of Sri Lanka, send this felicitation message to the Asian Association of the Open Universities and the Open University of Sri Lanka on the occasion of the 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities. I regret that my inability to present in person at this inaugural ceremony due to prior commitment. I note that the Asian Association of Open Universities, which was founded in 34 years ago by a group of open universities in Asia, including our own Open University of Sri Lanka, strives to widen the educational opportunities available to the people in Asia to improve the quality of institutions in terms of their educational management, teaching, and research, specifically promoting education by distance teaching systems. It is also the policy of the government of Sri Lanka to enhance the open university education system to provide distance education with the skill-based job-oriented higher education system using self-learning, guided learning, group learning, and project training in order to produce a creative employee. In fact, my government's commitment to the cause of distance education is amply demonstrated by the establishment of a dedicated state ministry for education reforms, and more importantly, a state ministry for open universities and distance learning promotion on the first time in the history of Sri Lanka. As a country, we are not satisfied with the current levels of enrollment in higher education. And we are taking every effort to ensure that all qualified students would be able to continue their higher education up to the degree level. Our aim is to create a graduate who is well disciplined and possesses the knowledge and skills required by the employment market. In this respect, I would like to appreciate the role played by the Open University of Sri Lanka to expand higher education to the hinterlands of this country. As the Minister of Education, I affirm my commitment to support the efforts of the OUSL in fulfilling the mandate of the government of Sri Lanka. Before I conclude my speech, I would like to convey my best wishes to the President and the Executive Committee of the Asian Association of Open Universities for the initiative that are being taken by the association to widen the educational opportunities available to all the people of the region and helping to promote education by distance teaching systems and developing its potentialities. I would also like to extend my wishes to the Open University of Sri Lanka in hosting a successful 34th Annual Conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities, despite the trying circumstances that we are facing today. I believe this conference will provide much required forum for meaningful discourse among the participants to achieve the intended outcomes. Thank you very much. All the very best.
You are now about to witness a flash of our performing cultural heritage. In the history of over 2,500 years of rich culture in Sri Lanka, there has been a variety of unique dancing styles developed in this island. Out of those, 3 dances are lined up for your enjoyment today. The first is a dance that has been developed by simulating the majestic movements of elephants or gajar, as in Sanskrit. Elephants are a noble class of animals for many Asian nations. This dance is hence called the Gajagavanama, or an appreciation of the elephant's style. An authentic drum of Sri Lanka called the Gataberia you will be heard being played at the background. The second dance uses one of the smallest types of drums in Sri Lanka. Players of this drum are required to be competent in both physical and artistic performance. You could see a blend of traditional and modern styles in this special performance. And lastly is the climax of the dancing styles of Sri Lanka called the Vesnatuma. This is an authentic performing cultural heritage of our nation. There is a unique blend of style, performance, and drum beats here. The ornamental band worn on the forehead of the dancers are given after a thorough training under an authentic teacher kinfolk. This dance was developed as an offering at Buddhist ceremonies, yet it is widely used in most of the other ceremonial events as well. All these dances are performed by the State Dancing Troupe of Sri Lanka. Do enjoy.
Da
with that lovely dance, we now pay, once more, we would like to pay our tribute to our generous sponsors. Our sponsors, the silver sponsor, Coursera for Campus, and our sponsors, SLCB, Sri Lanka Convention Bureau, COL, Commonwealth of Learning, SLASCOM, Dialogue, ICDE, or International Council for Open and Distance Education, Bank of Ceylon, Akbar, Premium Quality Tea, and Mandarina. This is a video tribute to our sponsors once again.
Are you looking for the ultimate events destination? The answer lies in an enchanting island, the events destination with the full package. Meetings, incentive travel, conferences, exhibitions, hosted in a place like no other, a place renowned for its smiling hospitality, with a splendid selection of 5-star hotels, boutique hotels, villas, and of course, enchanting beach resorts. An island nation with easy access to everything, international and domestic air services, transport facilities, including modern highways and superior communication. The land of 1,000 unique experiences, glitzy supermalls for shopping, great destinations for adventure, places rich in history and culture. Cuisine with the flavors of paradise. a truly unique destination for any event with endless possibilities for business and leisure.
With that video appreciation, with that visual appreciation of our sponsors, we would like to conclude this inaugural session of the 34th annual conference of AAOU from the Open University of Sri Lanka in Colombo. Kindly await in that same link that you're using for this inaugural event. Please wait for about 2 minutes for us to set up the conference proceedings and the technical sessions. I wish you, your families, your colleagues, your neighbors, and the people of your nations consistent and unfailing health. Please bear with us in that same link for 2 minutes. We will be back with the conference proceedings. Thank you. Once again, welcome to the 34th annual conference of AAOU. We are back faster. Our conference proceedings will now begin with the keynote address. Our keynote address will be delivered by Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe, former director of the University of Colombo School of Computing. The Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka, Professor Anbahan Aredure, will introduce you to the keynote speaker. Professor Anbahan Aredure, over to you.
I have great pleasure in introducing our first keynote speaker of the 34th annual conference of the Asian Association of Open Universities, Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe. A former director of the University of Colombo School of Computing, Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe has also served as a visiting professor at the Management and Science University of Malaysia, visiting faculty at the Umeå University of Sweden, and Dean of the Informatics Institute of Technology in Sri Lanka at various times. In 2001, he served as European Research Consortium for Informatics and Mathematics, ERSIM Fellow at National Institute of Research in Digital Science and Technology, INRIA Labs in France. Further, in 2002, he was a Fulbright Senior Visiting Scholar at the Carnegie Mellon University's Language Technology Institute in Pittsburgh, USA. After serving in various capacities at the University Grants Commission, Ministry of Higher Education, National Science Foundation, ICTA, LEARN, ISOC, SLSI, LSF, LKNIC, and SLUSCOM, more recently, Dr. Weerasinghe has been on national committees for upscaling the talent pool in data science, for setting up for a biotechnology park, and for forming a national export strategy in the ICT sector. He is currently a director of the Sri Lanka Search and Theekshana, a company set up by the University of Colombo School of Computing. Dr. Weerasinghe's research interests are in computational linguistics, including machine translation, and particularly in techniques employing statistical methods and machine learning using large data sets. He has led a group of 6 to 8 researchers involved in language technology at the University of Colombo's Language Technology Research Lab since 2004. His research interests expand naturally to artificial intelligence and more recently bioinformatics. This morning, Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe will speak to us on the title Learning Analytics. What can we glean from learner-generated textual content? Over to you, Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe.
Morning, and with your permission, I'm going to have my mask on. Let me first thank the AAOU for inviting me. It's a big risk to invite a person who I realized this morning is a practitioner of ERT, something I learned newly today this morning, emergency remote teaching. So it's a big risk. But I also want to give a small local surprise, because I don't think the current Vice Chancellor knows that my university career started in this university, in the Open University. And I don't think the Vice Chancellor who hired me, who is also here, realizes that he hired me. Though my stay was very short, it was very pleasant. So I want to talk well, there's another point. I want to congratulate the team here for this ambitious goal of running this international conference, because both our former Vice Chancellor of this university and I come from a school that didn't stop playing cricket even during World War II against the second best school that our Deputy Vice Chancellor is a part of. And yet this year it has been postponed or cancelled. Yeah. And so for the Open University Sri Lanka to host this in that context, I think is very, very creditable. So let me get on to the topic. And because of, thank you for the introduction, and because of that, you will realize my passion with text. So I'm going to talk initially about analytics in general, and then talk about the main story in analytics is data. And most of you currently use data for exploring and inferencing about things in learning. And then I want to talk to you about how when we move to text, this becomes a really a different ball game. And finally, I will end up with a little bit of, in fact, it's an open-ended ending, and that is to invite you to get into this area of learning analytics with text. So first, analytics, I mean, I know a lot of people don't like Wikipedia definitions, but the crux of this definition is that analytics is about computational analysis to discover, interpret, and communicate for better decision making. And nowhere is it more important than in learning and tracking learning. So is analytics another name for statistics? And so I got two graphics here to show the relationship between analysis and analytics, and actually both of these are also contradictory. So this diagram shows us analysis, which is statistics usually, is a subset of analytics, and this other one shows the relationship the other way. Okay, so there are no clear-cut clear-cut explanations of the relationship between these. However, this is one way to see it. And again, I must say this is the way people from analytics see it rather than people from statistics. In statistics, we are mostly looking at a hypothesis. So it's a top-down method. We are looking at hypotheses and we are collecting data to either reject or not of the hypothesis. So it's essentially a top-down approach. In analytics or data mining, it's called here, we are going the other way around. So we have data that we collect routinely, and then we are trying to see whether there are some patterns we can discover from that data. Here's another graphic that shows the relationship between these different fields that come together in analytics. And if you look at the bigger picture, it's much more than statistics and computing, but you also have mathematics. You also very crucially have the domain and the business knowledge. And in learning analytics, that domain is learning. So teaching and learning, how do we do analytics in that domain? So that's a big, crucial part of analytics when it comes to, without a domain, we will not really be doing anything really very useful. So initially, very quickly, because I think this is the early morning talk, thank you again for giving me this early morning talk when everybody is awake, but very quickly, we are used to analytics with numeric data. Now, some of the data we get is not really numeric, it may be categorical. That means it belongs to certain categories, and we have very good ways of analyzing that. So if someone is given this bunch of numbers, at least we first know, we want to know how many there are, then we want to know what is the maximum and minimum, what is the average, and we are not satisfied with that. We want to know whether that average is distributed in an even way or in an odd way. So these statistics summarize or describe data. But there's a famous data set called the Anscombe's quartet that has 4 data sets. All are shown here, X1, X2, X1, Y1, X2, Y2, X3, Y3, and so on. So 4 data sets. And we can see that they're all different, but amazingly, they have the same mean, they have the same distribution, they have the same regression line, they have the same correlation. And so that's why exploring data, statistics, descriptive statistics alone is not enough to describe this. And so you turn to visualizations. And those 4 data sets look like this. And then suddenly you realize, okay, now I understand the data. So descriptive statistics or metrics or measures alone often are insufficient. And you need some kind of visualization. But this is all to do with exploring the data. We want to go beyond that. And the thing we want to do with that is inference with the data. If you ask a high school student, is there a difference between describe and explain? They will say no, because whether they say describe or explain, we write the same thing. And yet, describe is what typically your cricket commentator does after every ball, whereas explain is the guy who occasionally comes and talks about why things are happening, right? So that's where we want to be. We want to make inferences from our data, not just explore our data. And for this, we have lots of statistical tools. I've just given a few of them: regression, ANOVA, clustering, time series, and so on. And we also have machine learning algorithms. Again, I've given a few: decision trees, nearest neighbors, naive Bayes, SVM, and stuff like that. So these help us to inference with the data. And this is what normally is built into many analytical tools, including learning analytics tools. But when it comes to text, if you think about it, all of us fill questionnaires. And in the questionnaire, most of the boxes are coded. That means we have some choices and we have to make a decision among the choices. There are a few fields that are open-ended text. you can write anything you want. And this is actually, if you ask the people, this is a psychological kind of tool, because the person thinks that they are able to then write their mind. Whatever they have in their mind, they can write. And if you ask the person who developed the questionnaire, what did you do with those answers for the open text boxes, they'll say, well, we just extracted the most important ones. And now in a situation like the Open University, where you have thousands of students, it's physically impossible to go through every one of those, even though a lot of important information often comes from those rather than the coded data. So generally, text is kind of an afterthought. So what happens when we move from data to text? Some people felt, okay, we can use this, we can define text as categorical data. And actually, categorical data is represented in form of text, let's say low income, middle income, high income, or something like that, right? Without any order, like let's say the districts or the states in your country. The problem with treating text like categories is that the number is very large. If you take each word, then you're talking about thousands of categories. And you can have a single form that has multiple meanings. And the most common one we hear is the bank, which is both the money shop and the river, the thing by the river. But there are many more. So bank also means rely and so on. And also, usually this text is highly unstructured. Nobody tells you how to write your comment, right? So it is highly unstructured. And so traditional categorical data analysis is inadequate to handle text. How do you handle text like this? Using our existing tools. So how do we explore text? We can't think in terms of a mean or a standard deviation and so on when we want to describe a document or a book, right? But we can do some things. And the kind of things we want to be able to do is to describe a document using the number of words, maybe the number of distinct words, punctuation, sentences, number of sentences, number of words per sentence. And these things can be characteristic of a person. So obviously someone like Shakespeare has a massive vocabulary, whereas average Sri Lankan will have very small vocabulary. So you can figure this out. And so there are tools online. This is an example from two speeches our former president gave. And if you look at it, these descriptive statistics don't tell us much. They are kind of inadequate. So we can then turn into visualization. And you may have seen this kind of word cloud or tag cloud, which is describing what the person said. Right? There is someone who has done this for all the State of the Union addresses by American presidents. And you can see that even the same president who has two terms, their focus is very different in the two terms. But now we will go beyond that exploring stage, just like in the data. Can you inference with text? And that's something like really, really not straightforward. No methods in traditional statistics, but developed more recently in the area, in the domain of machine learning, and being improved in what is known as deep learning. We will not really go into what is machine learning and deep learning, but look at the 4 basic steps. And this is very common with probably the statistical work you do also. We collect the data, we kind of clean or prepare, or in machine learning is called we wrangle with the data. And then the third step is a little bit of an unusual step from statistics, and that is we extract features. And when we do that, we have to deal with something called dimensionality, which we will not really talk about, but that we have, especially with biological or astronomical, that kind of data, we have to really deal with this curse of dimensionality. And finally, we can then inference a model, inference with data with and without supervision. So very quickly, what you're normally used to doing in learning analytics is that you have maybe not corporate data, but the university databases, the learning management systems, the virtual learning environments, or even maybe certain in the future IoT devices from which numeric data is gathered and presented in the form of tables and charts to the user. When it comes to text, the sources are, I've just given a few there, Wikipedia and Twitter and Facebook and so on. And generally we can access these through what is called an API. We can access programmatically the content without actually copying and pasting and so on. Or there is free text out there. So a lot of people want to find out about TripAdvisor, which gives you all the comparisons of various tourist destinations. And that doesn't have this so-called API that you can easily get data in. So you have to do what is called web scraping. So these are two forms of ways in which we get data. Now, in the case of a learning environment, you can imagine the forums and even the assignments, essays, and things like that are all textual. So the second stage is the data preparation. We refer to it as wrangling normally in machine learning, because unlike numeric data, textual data is predominantly unstructured. And this part normally takes a big portion of your overall task, that is to clean and prepare the data set. And it's quite messy, possibly contains markup, ungrammatical text. We can't ensure that people are grammatical when they write, particularly in the Asian context. Words, punctuation, word forms, misspellings, abbreviations, slang, and so on. New words are coming in to play all the time. So we prepare the data, and then comes the step that normally statisticians don't really talk about, and that is extracting features. Inferencing cannot be even done with nicely clean, normalized text. Okay, you need to do one thing, and that is we have to extract the important features. And so the big question becomes, how can we represent words? In other words, this text needs to be in some way parameterized. And the common way to do that is what is called to vectorize the text data, convert text data into vectors. So here's an example of 3 very simple documents. Each document has 1 line. And what we do is we end up extracting I think my slide got stuck. We create the unique set of words from the entire corpus, or all the documents. So from all the documents, what is the unique set of words that are present? And so that becomes a very long vector, if you like. And in that vector, we are able to, so in this small example with these 3 documents, we have only 18 unique words. And that 18 unique words are helpful to define a document. So here's 2 different ways to define. So the first one just says whether that word is there or not. So in document 2, those places where there are 1s means that that word is present. And in document 2, again, if you want to also include the number of times that word comes, so the first word, analytics, comes twice in document 2. So it says 2 instead of just presence or absence. So these are called bag of words. And generally in any real task, you will have not just 18 elements, but let's say 20,000 elements or something like that. So how do you work with that? That's a bit difficult, but another small way to improve this, treating every word as the same importance, is to create what is called importance weighting. It's called the TF-IDF weighting method. And yet we have a very large vector for every word, 5 to 20,000 words, let's say. And so more recently, people have come up with richer representations called word embeddings. These are in the range of 300 or 500. So every word, every concept is represented in a set of numbers of, say, 3 to 500. And so these are three common methods to do that. And you can see that research in this area is now being led by industry rather than academia. Thankfully, Stanford is still there, but a lot of the work is pushed by the big corporates. So that now if we have represent the text in numeric version, we can now apply all those data analytics techniques to our text data. And there are two main scenarios. One where we have the answer, that means somebody has annotated it, and you can imagine the kind of data that are like that. But there's also data where we don't have, and the majority of the data in the world is where no one has labeled or annotated. And the first kind is called supervised learning, and the second, unsupervised learning. So I'm just going to skip through this slide because it basically talks about what are the tools we have for doing this. But the last bullet is about democratizing this, right? The first two are like where you need to learn programming and all that. But the last one, which has three sub-bullets, three very popular kind of machine learning tools, are all graphical based. That means anybody, within quotes, can build these models using components and connections between them. And of course, if you go beyond that, you need to go into the cloud. And if you go beyond that in terms of model complexity, you have to go into things like deep learning. And yet, all this complexity now is packaged very often in services such as those provided by Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. And so you don't need to really be a programmer to use these models. Okay, so what does all this have to do with learning analytics with text? The reason we need all these methods is to inference with text. And there are two primary types of inferencing we do, but there are some others also. But the two primary ones are classification and clustering. So classification is where you have, let's say, some documents, and somebody has already labeled them, in this case, as food items or as mobile phones or as movies or something. And you train a model with that known answers, and new documents that come, it will automatically classify. So this requires a label training data, and generally this is a bit expensive to do. The more common thing is document clustering. And a small anecdote here, when the Indian net neutrality debate came up, and the government asked people, please tell us what your view is, because the context was that Facebook was trying to give cheap or free internet to the masses in India. And there was a big discussion about that. So they said, you can give your opinion, and they gave an email address, and this is the price of democracy. They received around 1 million emails. So when you have 1 million emails, what can you do? This is where things like clustering come in. So they realized that there was like very big cluster of very, very short contributions, and these are mostly mistakes and not serious emails. Then there was another big group of canned responses. So one community-based organization had gone and told people, write these answers. And so people who believe that community organization, they all wrote. So of course you can't dismiss it because there's a big number feel that way. And so those two were taken care of. And then there were also, of course, a few that were like entire policies. So those were referred to human evaluators. And so, and then of course there are other information extraction techniques to tell us what type of concern that they have about net neutrality. So this is like just an anecdote. And going further from just classification and clustering, we have lots of applications. And I'm not going to talk about each of these, but summarization, title generation, language identification, and there are like native language identification of English writers, speech recognition, text-to-speech. Some of these now have come to us in our usable state in our mobile phones, for instance, machine translation, question answering, and some of these have applications in learning analytics, and dialogue systems, or what is called conversational agents, things that you can have a conversation with to find out about, let's say, a particular domain. But now how can we apply these, or can we apply these into learning analytics? So a 2020 paper talks about learning analytic papers, and you can see the way they are increasing. Let's say over 800 articles in 2019, and it's a steady increase. If you look at text mining, because in this domain, they don't use the word text analytics because then it clashes with learning analytics. So text mining for learning analytics, much smaller. So the trend is around between 20 and 30. But this there's a kind of an outlier in the 2018. I think it's 50 something. But you can see that there is a big gap. And that's because most learning analytics are to do with numeric data and not with textual data. So where can we mine this data, or which text data to mine? In machine learning, this is called user-generated content. Not only machine learning, I think in social media, it's called user-generated content, UGC, or in learning, it is called student-generated content, or now they are saying that it's not only, they're being a bit more descriptive and saying it's learner-generated digital media, because you can also have images and videos and audio and so on. But most of it is textual or can be converted to text. So where do we find such in our environments? We have primarily in forums. And we know we can set up multiple types of forums. And then some of these virtual learning environments also have kind of social media kind of interfaces, course blogs, and also maybe interactions between instructor, tutor, and students. So all these become very rich sources of text. And of course, you also have the traditional coursework and assignments. So what kind of content do these have? Textual content of various forms, long, short, informal, formal. Photographs, often annotated, or even if it's unannotated, we can do something with it. Audio, and then video. So what can we do with this? We are trying to extract. Right? Traditionally, we only could count these. Okay, this student interacted in this forum so many times for this month. And those are the typical analytics that we get, because generally the primary concern is student retention, right? Student engagement, student retention. So we count them. But with this kind of technology, we can extract better insights and foresights and hindsight. So these are the three kind of things we talk about in data science. How do we do that? So from text, from things like forums, blogs, memes, we can extract text. From photos, we can, of course, people annotate their photos very often, but now increasingly they're not annotating. And so there's a way to do caption generation. I don't know whether you have seen this. You can submit a photo and get a caption that describes that photo. Speech recognition, or what is called speech to text, for audio and video content, you can extract. Now, remember, all this is in the state of the art. That means mostly for English and somewhat to European languages. So when it comes to our languages, native languages, Sinhala and Tamil, we have some areas to still develop. Even scene and action detection in videos, right? So there's research that actually will extract the scene or the action in videos. So that's the state of the technology. Then, of course, the learner's affective response. We want to also know whether the students are, happy, or they are grudgingly doing this, or are they actually falling back. So again, we rely on numbers usually. Okay, we figure out this person hasn't taken part in any online forum, so we try to follow up. But before that, before they stop engaging, you may already be able to detect, using things like sentiment analysis and emotion detection, whether the student is happy doing what they're doing, or whether they're challenged and engaged. So there are better estimates of student engagement than simply counts of how many responses they made. Then there are other applications such as automated essay scoring. Obviously, the obvious thing we want to know is plagiarism detection. And you can do I know most of you know about Turnitin, which basically is a huge database that compares your students' work with what it knows about. But there is intrinsic plagiarism detection, which is what humans do really. If you get an essay and then you suddenly realize, wow, the grammar is perfect in this part. So can you train a machine to detect that? So that you don't need a huge database like Turnitin. Knowledge extraction and things like cohesion. Is the essay cohesive, or there's a problem? So techniques to point those out. And in the case of forums, you can also build models of progress. Okay, is this person, how is this person progressing based on their textual input? Intelligent tutoring systems, I think you may have heard about these things, because initially it was all like they were, some of these big systems are like, they have invested millions of dollars in them. But now with technology around chatbots, more formally called conversational agents, and you have it, some of them on your phone, right? Where you can talk to them and they can respond. These can be trained so that they will identify weak areas of the student and keep asking questions to help the student improve in that area. And these are particularly important if you're talking about MOOCs, massively on large. So I know the holy grail is that the instructor is interacting. That's like the ideal. But very often the numbers are too large and you need a kind of digital assistant to help you to do that. So intelligent tutoring systems, computer-supported collaborative learning environment. So combining all these things, people have come up with things like this reader bench that tries to build an environment to support learning and to extract textual analytics. The big problem is that these are also standalone, so they are not integrated into the kind of virtual learning environments or learning management systems that we use typically. And then, of course, the field is quite wide open. There are people who have looked at native language prediction, which is important sometimes in an international setting to figure out by the English that they write, can you predict their native language so that you can provide some support. Intent identification. So when somebody says something, can you figure out their intent and then maybe alert the staff, okay, this person is feeling like this and is expressing their views. People have applied it to deception identification. So as we go on, we find new phenomena. So there are student interaction and there are some students who have other objectives. Can you identify those? And then other positive things like identifying student leaders or virtual assistants. I mean, we all need some virtual teaching assistants. And we find them actually in the student group. And can we identify them early and basically interact with them so that we can create another group? And the number of such applications is only limited by your kind of innovativeness. You say, I want to figure out this particular aspect. How do you do that? Using this technology by most likely by training on some existing data. And so, however, I must say that, there's a lot of hype around analytics. And so, and NLP and text analytics, sorry, this is not neuro-linguistic programming, but natural language processing and text analytics, they have two fundamental limitations, and they are limited context is considered by models. So a human looks at a much bigger context because we can access their social, economic context, and I don't know, let's say the pandemic right now, technology limitations, all that. So these things are only limited in that way. They are limited in context. And the second thing is they're constrained by the data that they are trained on, right? So that's why you need to constantly keep updating these models, because otherwise a new phenomenon you won't be able to detect. And then finally, I think there's a big need. These two fields have grown independently, data analytics and text analytics, but we need things that amalgamate these two, because both are really important to have a holistic view about how learning is happening with our students. So just to summarize, increasingly large amounts of data we have access to is in the form of text, and text is really messy, it's unstructured, it's ambiguous, and so on. But we now have the tools to cast text data in numeric vector form and some very rich vector forms. So combining this data and text analytics can help us to automate higher level tasks, particularly with the deep learning models that we now have access to. And so interesting research questions remain in the area of learning analytics. And definitely, I invite people from, because Open University is a place where you are totally dependent on this. So to join and do some research into these open questions. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Dr. Ruvan Weerasinghe for that enlightening keynote address. I hope the open universities around the globe and around Asia will look at the potential available in the areas where he dealt with. So with that, that keynote session is done with, and
with that keynote session, we go to the parallel sessions of AAOU 34th Annual Conference. Kindly go to the relevant links and participate in the parallel sessions. We wish you good learning. Thank you very much.